Hope everybody is having a wonderful day. Our no guest on this particular day, but we'll be joining in conversation about what's happening in the world and a number of issues that are going on in the world with our usual panelists. I did see that Nick was with me and Lee Newton Rhodes, in addition to Shaquille popped in earlier, and hopefully he'll be popping in later on during this show. And of course, Sasha will probably be coming in as well. And I've actually got a couple of questions for Sasha and other folks as we get ready to get into some of the news of the day and all in that space. One of the things that I was seeing was that the Philippines president is in the United States and is definitely going to be meeting with President Biden, as Biden is looking to strengthen ties with the Philippines. And that was actually a strong ally at one point. And then there was the whole thing around the current president's father and some of the things that were going on in corruption in that particular country. But then he has been the newly elected or recently elected president, and I guess he's trying to build up and reaffirm some of those ties that he had in the past, or his family had in the past, with the United States and all along those lines. Many of us do remember the kind of historical notion of Imelda Marcos, his, I guess that would have been his mom and everything, and her whole dealings with the shoes and having all of those shoes in her area and all in that space. And of course, that was only one of several things that were going on at that particular time in history and all in that kind of space. But we'll be interested to see what folks have to say about that particular meeting. And Washington is warning Beijing on the South China Seas and all in that space. And I know that Nick is going to love this one, but one of the articles that I saw was that apparently tourists are mobbing China's most popular attractions during Labor Day, because apparently they are saying that there is a post-COVID travel boom there in China, and that is a boost for their shaky economic recovery. So it does look like there is some notion that China may be recovering in the post-pandemic kind of era, even though there are folks that are still catching COVID even to this day, and there are still folks that are trying to figure out what the new normal looks like and all in that space. I do know that there are folks that are still doing the hybrid work. As a matter of fact, I was doing some work earlier today that is part of that hybrid model, doing some of the grading and assessment work from the lovely world of the computers and all in that space. So I had that going on, and it was definitely not having to go into the office, even though the stuff that I do in the entertainment community, we have been going back to the office more, because there has actually been performances at the Hayti Heritage Center and a number of other places that I am associated with. And actually, Jacoby was telling me yesterday after the news that, the games are definitely going on. The Bulls are doing quite well, that being our minor league baseball team. Well, maybe not quite well. They're like in second or third place, but they are still in the race and are the defending champions. And of course, the Hurricanes, which he also does some work with, are now in their next round of the hockey playoffs, because they are in the second round and will play. They just beat a team from that New York, New Jersey area. Sorry, Lee, that being the Islanders, but now they've got to play the Devils, which is another team in that area, because the New Jersey Devils and the Rangers had gone against each other and the Devils came out ahead. So that means that they will be playing the Devils in that next round. And of course, some people are also following what's going on in the NBA. There's even the battle of the old folks with the Golden State Warriors taking the Los Angeles Lakers, and definitely there's some other ones that are involved as well, including the Philadelphia 76ers and the Boston Celtics. And I, of course, have my biases for that one, since Dr. Doc Rivers. I started to say Dr. Rivers, but Doc Rivers went to Marquette at the same time that I was there. So I'm hoping that he can win another championship, since the last one he won was actually for Boston, and all in that space. But getting back to some more serious news, and I was wondering if Sasha's got some thoughts about this. I'm sure he may when we get to some of the other news of the day and everything along that line, particularly when it comes to Russia and Ukraine. I had read a news report not that long ago about Russia and the Ukraine, and how the uh, Putin's mistress was apparently at a gymnastic event for Ukrainian children. I think it was held in Serbia or one of those other parts of that um, Eastern European region, and all in that space. I was surprised that she was allowed to be the judge, and was surprised that they didn't try to grab her and maybe even arrest her or something along those lines. Supposedly, she might even be pregnant with Putin's quote unquote love child, even though I think Putin's around 70 and she might be around 39 or something like that. And there's even speculation that she may be trying to opt for a more greater job within the Russian government. So that is one of the things that I saw about that particular conflict. I also saw that South Africa has said that if he comes down to South Africa for the conference that they are about to be holding, he will be arrested. So if he comes down to South Africa, he will be arrested, even though South Africa is part of that whole BRIC alliance along with Russia, China, and others. But they, I think one of the people had even told him that if he wanted to come, he could come to the meeting. He just needed to come by Zoom or team meetings, because if he showed up in person, they would be obligated to arrest him. And that is what they said, and all in that space. And I also heard some people that were talking about if Putin was to be assassinated, even from the internal forces, would it be a case of many fiefdoms that could also be equally, if not more, dangerous, because they would all have possibly nuclear capability, and all in that space. So that's one of the things that I was curious to hear what Sasha had to say about that, and what other folks had to say about that as well. And there's some other things that are going on in the world. Macron is facing a Labor Day protest as pensions reform the anger that is already there, and all in that space. So he's trying to figure out how to deal with that. I think that Nick had said that he had upped the retirement age, but I guess folks are not all that pleased with that, and in that space. And Sudan fighting, the UN is warning of humanitarian breaking points in that African nation, as that conflict drives 100,000 people over the borders amid crumbling ceasefires. So that is another humanitarian crisis that is going on in the world as well. And in a election in South America, Santiago Pena won that election, the Paraguay election, and that ends concerns about ties with Taiwan. So that definitely calms the fears of another Taiwan ally falling, because apparently he has definitely been a supporter of Taiwan, and definitely it looks like that long ruling party romped to their presidential victory, and all in that space. So I also saw that the Japanese prime minister was visiting South Korea ahead of the G7 summit, and all in that kind of way. So there's all kinds of things going on in the international front, and in other things that are going on also. So I'm going to bring in Lee Newton Rhodes. I was giving a little bit of the things that I saw in the world, didn't even get to the U.S. stuff. And I do know that there was a manhunt that I think is still going on, even though there is some folks that are thinking that the manhunt might have been insensitive in the way that it was portrayed, and all in that way, because it was a brutal manhunt after a man had been shooting his gun apparently in his yard, and his neighbors had complained about that, and then he proceeded to basically assassinate several members of that family. And apparently,
good morning, Mark. Do we know anything about him?
we know that what I'm hearing is that he is a Mexican national. The people that were shot were from Honduras. There were some things about conversations around uh, illegal immigration and things of that nature.
So a Mexican national who came to the country legally, or not?
That I'm still trying to get a handle on. I know that they're still trying to find him. Apparently, he's disappeared into the wilderness, and all in that space. So I'm still trying to learn more about that myself as well. But that would be a interest in. Well, it says I just found out something. According to ICE sources, the Texas massacre suspect was deported 4 times. So apparently he's been deported 4 times. There was also
Wonder how he got in the 5th time. Was it under Biden? Does Biden? I mean, maybe Biden has some blood on his hands since the border is so open, just letting these people come in.
Yeah, and like I said, there were some questions about the gun laws in the sense of whether he had the right to shoot on his property or not. And apparently it had something to do with the size of the property as well, from one of the articles that I read and everything. And like I said, I'm not sure whether he came in under Biden, whether he came in under Trump, or who he came in under, or when he came in, and all of that. But if he was deported 4 times, he's probably been deported under various administrations, to your point and everything. So it might be that we have to do some other things in that.
But clearly, he doesn't care about the laws here. Can I assume that, since he was deported 4 times?
Well, I mean, yeah, apparently ICE got him, sent him back. ICE then he came back across and all in that space. So like I said, but as I brought up on one of our news stories yesterday, if he was coming in and was being brought in by let's just say some of the farm laborers and everything in that space, it is quite possible. I'm not saying that it is, because I don't know the nature of the gentleman's work or not, but it is quite possible that he might have been coming in illegally, because the farmers of that part of Texas were, I won't say bringing him in, but maybe they were not exactly discouraging him if he was one of their prime workers and all in that space. So I do think that sometimes the employers also have to have some thoughts about what is going on in that space as well. But that's just my thoughts, because I do think that sometimes we let the corporate folks slide while we're worrying about what the immigrants are doing in that space. But I do think the corporations might have some blood on their hands as well, to borrow your analogy.
Well, it's not the corporations who let him in. It's the Biden policy who let him in.
No, but I'm saying
obviously 5 times.
No, but Lee, I hear what you're saying about the policy.
You're making excuses for it, Mark.
I'm not making excuses. I hear what you're saying about the policies, but
it has nothing to do with policy. I mean, if this guy is going to could break the law under any administration.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Also, from what I understand, aren't you innocent in the United States until you're proven guilty?
Nicky's been guilty 4 times already. We kicked him out
of this particular crime.
Yes and no.
So right now he's a person of interest, but I would say severe interest.
I hear your point, but and not to pick sides, but why is it people are so quick to crucify Trump on all these allegations over the last 6 years or whatever? But you know what? He's not been convicted of anything. Who's giving him the benefit of the doubt? That's really only in a court of law, not in the court of opinion, though, if I'm not mistaken.
In court of opinion, you can believe anything.
Correct.
But in court of law, he's innocent until he's proven guilty.
Correct. Now he's just a suspect.
The facts don't look very good in his favor. And if you also look at it, obviously the person has some serious anger issues, because from what we understand is that these people came over and said, hey, could you please stop shooting your gun? Now, that's probably not a good idea to begin with. If one of my neighbors was shooting the gun, I would call the police to make the conversation, not myself.
Or at least be armed myself, right?
Yeah, but even if you're armed yourself, and they had that in Salt Lake a couple of years ago. So some guy tried to do his own vigilante, and he went out and he shot the guy that was robbing him. The guy shot back, and they both died. Okay, that's kind of not my idea of a good lifestyle here in the wild, wild west of America, where we believe in shooting people, obviously, and we believe in carrying guns, as opposed to Spain, which has very tight gun control and a 0.42% murder rate by gun. All right. And Morocco, which is safer than the United States. All right. So we do believe in shooting.
They just use knives there.
Pardon?
They just use knives there.
No, they just don't have the violent crime that we do in the United States, Dan. See, the United States has a lot of myths going on. We're the best place in the world to live. We used to be. And we have the highest education rate. We used to be. And we live in our own little bubble because we don't travel outside the U.S. Unfortunately, I made the mistake to go to Spain and Morocco. And unfortunately, I discovered that those 2 countries are safer, 4 to 10 times safer than the United States of America. So,
Nick, but you have to be careful. I'll put the caveat there. No, don't go to Ireland. You might be arrested for your speech. You hear what's going on there now with their speech laws?
Really, they have sedition laws and stuff.
Evidently, they're cracking down on hate speech so much that even Elon Musk is slamming them for their attack on free speech.
Hey, Lee. Speaking of speech,
Oh, he'll get.
Well,
on a
as you know, even the U.S. freedom of speech has limitations. So the thing is,
No, that's what. Lee,
and
that's one of the questions I was going to ask.
there was a
man.
media
Sure,
company called Fox News that discovered freedom of speech in terms of defaming and lying corporations and creating myths regarding the election was not allowed. Okay, so they were going to basically litigate on the free speech issue on
But Ireland's going so far; it's almost like the thought police. What they're doing.
well, it's always facts and circumstances. To what extent does, if you get on a major media network and you intentionally lie about another company, do you breach the First Amendment rights that you have to freedom of speech and expression?
It's interesting you say that. I forgot what state it's in. I think it might be Texas. They're going after now these pharma companies for lying about their products.
Yeah, and the thing is, we had a guest on a couple weeks ago on let's see, it was David Walker's show, and he wrote a book. I got it downstairs. Okay, which he was discussing
Jay Abramson.
Yeah, Jay Abramson book. Yeah, it was pretty good. How the pharmaceutical industry basically manipulates their data and manipulates the media and manipulates everybody, and you get manipulated every day. If you watch major media today, tonight, or this morning, you will see ads on drugs. In other words, they're pushing their pills on America. Whether or not these drugs really work the way they say they work is.
But they, over the last few years, though, that's the vaccines. They made claims publicly, and people relied on that. And forget about the federal government. Now the state of Texas is going after them, and as they should.
Yeah, well, I mean, they make claims right now because I'm on this crazy Rosuvastatin, which I guess used to be Lipitor, but they prescribe that to everybody. In other words, like if you're old like I am, here you go, here's a anti-cholesterol drug.
Yeah, I'm on that too.
So yeah, no, but see, Dan, they give it to everybody. Okay, and all you can do today is hope that it works, as opposed to, hey, it works. It reduces cholesterol, but does it reduce heart attacks? And if you look at the data, you may be you might be better off taking a bloody sugar pill. I mean, it's just
interesting cholesterol fact that most cholesterol, I think 80% of it, is inherited. It's genetic. It's not based on your diet and exercise.
Yeah. But the thing is, they can control cholesterol through medication, but does that necessarily control heart disease, which is our number one killer? Now you go to this coronavirus, right? Now I read the other day that, it's all gone. Only 1,042 people died last week. It's gone, and 1,000 people died last week.
Nick, why do we still have the vaccine mandates for people coming to visit the United States? I don't get that.
I don't either, but I don't make the policy of the United States, so who knows what they do.
There's a lot of policies we don't get. One of the questions I was going to ask, and this is actually coming back to Texas and rules and regulations. One of them I don't have problems with, which people may be surprised at, maybe even Dan, but apparently one of the legislatures that is coming up in Texas is a legislature to have basically what amounts to prayer time within the school. So they would have prayer, and you can pray to whoever you want to pray to. You can pray.
Mark, is it prayer time or is it quiet time?
Well, I know. I think they basically said it was prayer time within the Texas law and everything. So it wasn't like reflective time, but it was definitely that you could pray to whoever you wanted to, from my understanding of the law. Now, there also is a law that is out there, and this is the one that, while I definitely have some religious views that are some that may be liberal, some that may not be as liberal, and all in that space, but I'm not 100% sure that, it's very good to have the flag, and I think most classes do have the flag in their classroom, but apparently there's a
the American flag you're talking about.
Huh?
You're talking about the American flag.
The American flag. But apparently there is a law that they are thinking about putting in Texas that would require that the 10 Commandments be placed in every classroom. So that might be an interesting law as to whether it passes or not, because that is a law that is up for the consideration by the fine folks in the Texas legislature.
What's the downside of doing that?
Well, I mean, if folks are going to live by those principles, there might not be a downside. But I mean, is everybody necessarily a Christian in America? Is everybody necessarily trying to follow those rules? Or do you then say that you have to put up rules of the, say, majority group if there's a majority group that is in those areas? So say that you are in a part of Texas that is significantly Muslim, and I don't know what the equivalent of the Ten Commandments is for Muslim Americans, but if they are in an area that is that kind of population, do you then?
I don't think the Ten Commandments offend the Muslims. It doesn't offend the Jews because they were given to the Jews. It doesn't offend the Christians. I guess you can be a Satanist and it might offend them, or a Buddhist where it wouldn't really matter to them one way or the other. We make too much of this. I really think we do. The Ten Commandments are basically the laws upon which, and the ideas upon which our government was formed.
No, but one of the other laws, Dan, is separation of church and state. And if there's separation of church and state,
there's not.
You put the Ten Commandments.
Yeah, but the Ten Commandments isn't an establishment of religion. It's a historical document.
Well, like I said, I mean, it will be interesting to see which way Texas goes with that. But I do know that there are some folks that would wonder if that is going down a slippery slope if you are separating church and state. But there's some people that say we're already separating, unifying church and state, and some that think that we are separating it further than it needs to be separated. So, I mean, I can see where both sides of the argument could be out there and all in that kind of way. But it'll be interesting to see whether it actually passes in Texas and whether it goes to other parts of the United States.
Mark, to get on another point, isn't this foundational to our country? I mean, the Declaration of Independence mentions God and also mentions the Creator.
Yep.
I mean, but there are things within the Declaration that we could get into.
Does it have to be edited out now?
Well, I mean, there were other things that were in there that were not necessarily part of the original of what was going on, because they were parts of society that were not trying to be as recognized as they were recognized later. I mean, that's the whole reason that we had the women's right to vote. That's the whole reason that we got away from the 3/5 of a man, the theory of African Americans, and a number of other things that were edited into some of the things in our government to make us more inclusive and to actually live up to the promise of what the Constitution was saying that it was going to live.
What in the heck are you talking about?
The fact that most of the folks that were there that created the Declaration were of a certain part of society. They were definitely part of the elite and all in that space. So there were rules that were set up that were not necessarily for the betterment of all of society. And there were rules that were made into the amendment to make it a more just society in the United States. That's what the hell I'm talking about, Dan.
The amendments weren't about making our society more just. The amendments were recognizing the inalienable rights of all people.
That's what and henceforth recognizes the injustice that happened when it was originally created.
Oh God, you hear all this injustice talk. It's like you poor people. Let my people go, right? It's sort of like
I heard that before.
It's like my people were persecuted in Missouri and by the U.S. government and everything else.
Many people
let my people go.
I'm just talking about the history and the reason that things were created, and there can't be any argument about that.
Here, Mark, how many slaves, how many black folks who were free owned slaves?
No, there was definitely.
It was in the thousands. It was in the thousands.
There was also folks that sold themselves down the river, including in Africa and everything else. So we can go into that whole history, but that's not what I was going with the old conversation.
Well, but what I'm saying is all this rhetoric about making us a more just society and all this stuff about. See, this is an argument.
You just said it, Dan. You just said that the reason we did the amendments was to make things more innate and everything.
I said
what I said in the beginning.
That
you just basically agreed with me. So you agree with me with your saying, and now
first
you're
10 amendments
makes absolutely no sense, Dan. Because you originally what you said is that
were provided
amendments to make things better, which is all I was saying.
Yeah, hey, Lee. Yeah, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. among these are, and then there was a whole discussion about whether they should have the first 10 amendments at all, because everybody sort of understood that that's what it should be. But they codified it.
But if you're the ruling class is making those arguments, did you actually believe it, or did you just write it because, not you personally, but did they just write it because it was good lip service, like we see about the current politicians? And that's why those amendments had to be made in order to make sure that what was said was actually the promise that was made was actually delivered. That's the reason of everything from the civil rights amendments, everything else, is that you can say those words and not necessarily mean them and everything. I mean, that's what we even see in today's politics.
Yeah, and there's an argument to say the 14th Amendment actually made us all slaves, all government property. Instead of freeing the slaves, it actually made us all government property.
We're getting there now, Dan.
I know we are. I mean, there's an interesting view on the way our society happens to work now, because if you're a W-2 laborer, you're really subject to the corporations and the rules of the corporations, and you're ruled.
Dan, one of the things that Reverend Barber has talked about, and some people may like him, some people may not like him. I'm not saying that I even like everything that he is about, but definitely I think that he has some good points. And one of the points that he has made is that we've been stuck on $2 and stupid for the lower end of minimum wage forever and everything. So definitely, if you are a restaurant worker, or if you are one of those that quote unquote depends on tip economy and everything, your minimum wage that is federally allowed is like $2.15 or something along those lines, and all in that space. So we've been stuck on that forever. So like I said, we've been stuck on stupid for a while. So I don't know anybody that can survive even with tips on $2.15.
Mark, it's not meant to survive on it. It's meant for people like me when I was in high school to get to entry-level jobs. You're meant to get experience and to move up on the ladder. You're not meant to support a family on minimum wage.
That's it.
And the people that it hurts most are those who are entering the market and those who are unskilled.
No, but I'm saying, but if you are going, and there are people even in the those jobs that for whatever reasons, and I'm not saying that it's always necessary. I mean, we know the statistic around welfare, the mythology of the Black welfare queen. And I'm not saying that there aren't African-American welfare queens, but the actual face of welfare is a white woman. That is actually who makes the majority of the welfare checks.
That's probably accurate.
Huh?
What's the point? That's probably accurate, but what's the point?
The point is that if you are working in the job field and all along those lines, and you are in that restaurant field, and that's where I was going with that, and all in that space, that if you're in that restaurant field and you're going to make a living out of the restaurant field, and some people, for whatever reasons, they want to work in restaurant businesses, and they may not always be able to work in that field. Some of them are using it as a tool to get into other jobs and everything. We know that's the stereotype of the creatives who work in the restaurant field. So like I said, I just think that $2.15 is ridiculous. It's been ridiculous since it came out, and I think it hasn't raised since like the 60s. So we're in 2023 and we haven't at least looked at cost of living increases in that space. That makes no sense to me. Maybe it makes sense.
How much are you willing to pay for burger and fries?
Huh?
How much are you willing to pay for burger and fries as the wage and minimum wage goes up? You want to pay $20 a burger?
Well, I'd be willing to pay more than, if it's going to help the working class and the things of that nature. I have no problem with paying a little bit extra and everything. Now that I may be
McDonald's workers make $15 an hour
space.
Anyway, right?
Say what?
If you flip burgers at McDonald's, you make $15 an hour.
Well, has McDonald's made that a policy and everything? You're using that as a corporate example, and I'd have to go back and see whether that is the case with that particular corporation. Because yes, you are right. There are some corporations that have that figure, but there are a number of people that are only making what I just said, whether that's at a restaurant, on a bar, and they're dependent on their tips. And it's not just folks that are doing it as a part-time job or as a job to lead into other jobs. Because of the nature of the society, there are folks that literally have to make that living on a regular basis. So that's where I have a problem with it.
Well, I mean, then go work for somebody else.
I would recommend to go back to the roots. So somebody invested their money time to set up the business. His goal is to make that business profitable as much as it is possible. He's responsible to himself and his family, first of all. And if there are other shareholders, then he's responsible to other shareholders as well. So for them to sell their product and charge as much as it is possible, that's one of the goals. Another goal is to pay as little as possible to people who are working for that business. This is the basic. Now you can play with it. Now you can impose that no. You must sell it only for that price, because otherwise you contribute to inflation. So therefore, this is a price that you can sell or less. You can sell it for more. Or you cannot pay your workers, say, $2, $5, whatever, $10 an hour, so on. The minimum is you have to pay $15 an hour, okay? That's the rules. So here is you must pay this, and you cannot sell them for more than this. That kills the whole idea of entrepreneurship, to risk your capital money and set up the business when you're regulated that here is what you can charge, here is what you can pay your workers. That's it, the end of story. So your best bet is to close.
Sasha, every job.
So that's the kind of world Mark wants.
No, 1 second. Every job that I've ever had, and I've had a number of them, has had a review process, and you are reviewed on how you are doing on that job, and then there is oftentimes a cost of living increase. Now, as we have gone through economic hardships and things of that nature, they might not be doing it as much as they used to do it, but that was a regular thing that went on during the course of the process. And there are some folks that don't even get that, and they are in those jobs and they never get those opportunities to get the raise that we're saying is very easy and should be given to opportunities to given to folks. So that's all I'm saying, is that shouldn't there have those opportunities to be reviewed, to actually have that opportunity to increase their wages based on their performance and all in that space? And there are a number of jobs that are out there that is not the case.
Mark, there are a number of jobs that their worth is not that amount. So what happens? They evaporate. That's what Sasha is saying. It's not worth it to employ people for jobs that are worth less than minimum wage.
I mean, well, if we want to go into that whole argument, that was another article that I was getting to bring up that is somewhat related. There are some people in the fashion world. The fashion world is very high paid and all in that space. I don't claim to be a fashionista of any sort. I basically have certain clothes that I am comfortable with, and I like the ones that I have in that sense. But some of the fashion folks in that industry are worried because there has been some shows recently where AI is the one doing the modeling. So they are afraid that they are about to be out of a job because it'll be AI prompt.
That's what employers do. You raise the minimum wage, automation kicks in because it does the investment pays for the workers now.
I'm sorry, what was that, Ali?
As you raise the minimum wage, it's it makes more business sense for the employers to automate a lot of positions.
I mean, but
the restaurant business for sure.
I mean, there are certain positions that are being automated, and the question is, at what expense are they being automated? Because yes, the restaurant business, there are a number of restaurants, know up there in the New York area and even some in the South, that a lot of the ordering is being done by computers and a number of other things. So you can even go through the drive-through, and there are people that are not necessarily there that are taking your order and that space. And now there is folks that are afraid of that in the fashion industry as well. I'm sure that eventually we won't need LeBron James. We'll just be watching a bunch of computers, similar to some movies that I used to watch back in the day. And
you're right.
That solved a lot of problems, really.
Yeah, they don't take your orders anymore. They don't take your money anymore. That's all automated. They do as little as possible.
Well, part of the reason they don't take your money is the whole thing around. There are a lot of folks, and I know Sasha's not a fan. I'm not saying that I am either, but there are a lot of folks that are overly excited by the nature of crypto and all in that spaces. Ironically, that is, which I just recently learned last week, it is the minority population that is disproportionately going into crypto because they are seeing that as a way to become richer quicker and all in that space.
Get rich quick. No, don't get rich through hard work. Get rich quick. You know, one problem I have with the what do I call it, the minimum wage worker, is that everything that media talks about is based on, I'm going to be an employee, I'm going to be upset because I make a minimum wage. They don't discuss the franchise owner. So maybe we should discuss the franchise owner from McDonald's. So I'm going to look at McDonald's because it's one place where, hey, I want to get paid more money. The franchise owner puts in, on average, a $45,000 fee just to get a franchise. They put 1.3 million of their hard capital into this to pull out maybe $150,000 salary, which they might be better off just putting the money in the stock market and not creating the McDonald's franchise whatsoever. The McDonald's franchisee, the person who owns the business, has the opportunity to lose $1.3 million. The franchisee has to basically pay state income tax, federal income tax, franchise fees, organize the food, distribute the food, hire employees, fire employees. And we're talking about the bloody minimum wage worker? No. The real problem is in our education system, we should talk about becoming the franchisee owner and the things that they have to face on a daily basis, which far exceeds getting up in the morning, going into work and flipping a bloody hamburger. And that's the serious nature of what that franchisee owner goes through every day. And our education system does a disservice by not discussing what it is to be an owner. They always look at the vantage point of the employee, the double E. They never look at what the owner goes through on a daily basis, which is like hell every bloody day, to pull out a salary, which they may be better off just putting in with Shaquille and forgetting about it. Anyway, that's
but I mean, that's one of the arguments that folks have made, even in some of the shows that we have aired and everything, because there are definitely some people, even within various minority communities, that are very much interested in being the franchise owner, whether that's the franchise owner in the sense of a business or whether it's a franchise owner in the sense of real estate or a number of other things, because they think that that is a better way to get quote unquote generational wealth.
Actually, they might be right. Owning real estate, according to one data source I read, 90% of all millionaires in the United States became millionaires through owning real estate, not cryptocurrency, real estate. And they did it over a long period of time. It's called long and hard work. The people who run into cryptocurrency and the lottery expect instant gratification in this world. And frankly, as they say in Pawn Stars, it ain't happening. You know, the people that are successful, that's the reason you need to read the book, The Millionaire Next Door, actually suffer for 20 to 40 years investing in things like real estate over a 20 to 40 year period, grinding out pennies, and then eventually become dollars.
But what do you say?
Investing in crypto is excellent.
This is what they should be teaching people in school, not teaching them to become a bloody minimum wage worker and complaining about your salary. Have them teach about being a business owner. And Mark, there are 3 million minority-owned businesses in the United States. 3 million of them have figured it out. What about the rest of them? They haven't figured it out. But I don't think it's a racial thing. I think the white Americans don't figure it out either. And so they work until they die because they don't realize that the way they're doing it ain't going to work. So you need to read the book, The Millionaire Next Door, and then get on the right bandwagon. And I hate to say it, a lot of the people that are very successful grind out through the dirt of owning real estate over a long period of time. It's
I know a number of folks that are in that real estate lane, and they're doing quite well. Some of them are struggling and everything. I mean, one of the things that you hear from certain people is this notion of and it comes down to what Dan and others on this panel are part of, which is the folks that are very much into religion and the religious values. And one of the things that I've heard several people say is it isn't the obligation of society to look out for the least of these, because that is a quote that is actually within the Bible. I've heard several ministers bring that up, which it is not actually done enough of in society.
One of your obligations, the other obligation is obviously to provide service to people. And the thing is, if you look at it, what does the business owner does who opens up the McDonald's franchises? They provide service, they provide jobs to people, they provide service to people, they provide a clean environment to people, and not only that, they take an enormous amount of risk to be successful in an industry that's basically very difficult to be successful in. And we don't give them enough praise for what they do. We don't teach people about these business owners. You know why the education system doesn't do it? Because the teachers, Dan, as you know, being in education, never owned a business before in their bloody lives. They have no clue what it's all about.
Yeah,
So,
most of them don't.
I hate to
I mean,
say
there
it,
was
most
a
of your-
time that there was
most
a
of your
time.
teachers are just government employees. with a
Well,
bloody
and the
bloody-
ones that own businesses and or have side businesses typically don't stay in teaching. They typically end up doing whatever their side business is full time, because teaching doesn't pay enough, and it's not worth the grief that you get with all the government rules and all the woke stupid things that people are teaching now. And so, and then so Mark narrows his eyes at me.
No, I'm just trying to figure out what you
Well,
mean by
I mean,
woke stuff.
you know,
Because, like I
the
said,
thing-
you keep
the
using that
business owner
definition, and I'm
business-
going like
your-
the last time I
business
checked, the
owns you.
definition of
It's
woke was
hard
being
bloody.
awake.
Well, for
Say
you,
what?
yeah, that's really good. I like
I
it
mean,
when you're awake.
part of the reason I started my business back in 1984 was I hated having to, what do they call it, apply for a job, meet with employers, go through a process that I thought was demeaning and humiliating. And I said, I don't want to sit on that side of the street anymore. I want to sit on the other side of the street. And they said back then in 84, well, you can't, there was all this rumor, you can't start your own law practice right out of law school. They were full of it. Not only could you do it, you could be extremely successful with a great business plan. We're making over $1 million in 3 years out of practice. I mean,
Well, speaking of things that we're out of practice of, and I know that y'all are going to love this story that I'm
It was great to be bankrolled, though, right, Nick?
bankrolled. I wasn't bankrolled. What are you talking about?
Sure. No,
I
you made a lot-
bootstrapped it.
Well,
you
I
know?
know, because you're exceptionally bright and capable.
Yeah, but the thing is also, come on, Dan. Okay, the business plan was real simple. Estate planning practice in South Florida.
Oh yeah,
Okay. Now
exactly.
you think about it.
It's
in
like
Naples,
shooting-
Fort Myers,
It's like
Palm
shooting
Beach.
fish in a barrel, right?
You know what I mean? Or it's just like saying this. You can be very successful selling cokes in the Orange Bowl. And I used
Yeah,
to-
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
speaking of,
I'm-
Nick,
Orange
because you're
Bowl
going to love this one. I got
down in
another
Miami.
legal question to ask you because
sell
we know
cokes
what
in
happened
Orange
in
Bowl.
Tennessee. Hold on a second,
Yeah.
Nick. We know what
Hold
happened
on
in
a second.
Tennessee with the folks that complained and were protesting about what was going on with the gun rights and everything. Now it's happening closer to where Dan is and everything, because Utah and Montana aren't that far from each other. And Montana State Representative Zoe Zeifer has asked the court on Monday to allow her for her return to the White House, to the House floor, after she was silenced and barred for chiding her Republican colleagues, because actually she's a Republican, over legislation to restrict gender-affirming health care and for encouraging protesters. So apparently she is trying to get back in office this particular transgender.
Mark, was the restriction anything to do with children?
No, the
Huh?
restriction had to do with she was disrupting the House. I mean,
Yeah,
I know what they
she's-
were talking about. The bill that they were talking about.
Yeah.
this
It
is where
was
the media's
messing
biased.
things up.
They change it into a transgender issue
yeah.
because she happens to be
right.
transgender. That wasn't
Right.
the reason she got her little
They,
butt
they.
kicked
Yeah.
out. She got her butt kicked out, or he kicked out, or whatever
Hey.
it was, because basically the person was disruptive. Too
Yeah.
bad. So sad.
But hold on a second. But one of the things that she said, and that's one of the other issues I
said
get ready to
this,
bring up, was she talked about the mental health of our youth. And she said that suicide among transgender youth is not imaginary, it's not a game, and it's not a political foul and everything. And I had read an article earlier today where I think it was like 1 in 10 of the young folks in America have said that they have been sexually abused. Maybe even, I want to say it was even raped.
Well, but what does that have to do with
And there were some
transgender?
other high figures of how many of them have dealt with mental abuse, whether that was bullying or a number of other things. So it seems to me that might be another pandemic that we are facing as well. And I'm not just saying the transgender act, that those tips that I gave about the 1 in 10 was children in general. I didn't say
That's
anything
an
about the transgender.
abuse. That's an abuse situation, not the transgender issue. And so here's the thing. Definitely, I think transgender people who claim they're transgendered as young people should have mental health counseling, because they obviously have a mental illness. That's what it is. It's a mental illness. It's either a depersonalization or a bipolar disorder or autism or whatever it happens to be. And they need treatment for that. They don't need to be castrated and have boobs inserted or the other way around. That's just not the solution. They've got to come to terms with who they are, and a lot of kids have to learn who they are and what it's about.
Dan,
What the
Dan,
world is
and
about.
Dan and Nick, hold on a second. I hate to tell you this, but and this may shock you, since both of you are of this philosophy and everything, or this religion. Mormonism is not the leading Christianity in America and everything. So there are folks that would argue that you might need to be mentally appraised as well because the two of you are Mormons. I personally don't agree with you that.
Mark, you can't compare that.
Man, I tell you, you
We're
just
deviants,
ignited
Mark.
a
I'll
fire.
admit we're deviants, but
I mean, it's sort of
deviance
like,
is
it's
a
sort of like being
spectrum. It's like a
racist,
bell
right, Mark?
curve.
Are
Say
you
what?
being racist? Are you being
people
racist?
really
I'm not
follow
being
You're a
racist. Hold on,
misogynist.
you just made a
You're a racist and a
transgender. You
misogynist,
just made a
Mark.
transgender bias statement, so I threw it back at you.
Oh no, you're talking about mental illness versus someone who has a Christian faith and a deep belief in faith in God. If you got a problem with that, Mark,
No, I don't have no problem at all. I am deeply religious myself, so don't even go there with me and everything. So
then stop. Then don't take issue with Nick.
the question I
the
asked
pain
was,
that
you
Nick
made a
brought.
statement about transgenders, and
That's
you made
not a
that there was
religion,
mental
Mark.
illness. I don't
That's
know
a
that
mental
for fact.
illness,
You
Mark.
have not you've not
Mark,
given a
Mark,
base that is a mental
that
illness.
is
You have not
a
made it a
mental
base
illness
fact that it is a
that
mental illness. You are
requires
making an
mental
assumption.
treatment.
So that's why I
Let's see
turned
what
it
the
back around on
psychiatrist
you and
It's
everything.
not.
That's a good
Yeah,
question.
you're
Say
just
what?
so full of it.
What did you say, Nick?
Let's see what the psychiatrists say about transgender being a mental illness. In DSM, I think they have 5. That would
Yeah,
be,
there are. It's a DSM. It's a.
Yeah, that's-
but I think it was removed.
I think you're not.
I think
gonna-
it was removed from the DSM-5,
I don't
and I
think you're
think
going to find that normal behavior. It would be probably what they call abnormal psychology.
Yeah, and,
I
and
mean,
there are
there's a large
standards.
population of people
There
that
are
are swingers in
standards.
America. Does that make
It's
them?
not a large
Does
segment
that
of
make them mentally ill?
Mark,
Mark,
it's not a
Mark,
large.
we're
I
talking
think-
about
I
children.
think based on the
Children
Mark,
think
I
they
think
can
based-
fly. You're going to tell them you push them off a building? Sure, you can fly, kid. Go for it.
No, I'm not going to tell them that at all. And I definitely, but I'm just saying that my original point was that there are a number of children that are complaining about mental illness. They're saying that we're in the middle of another pandemic because of the state of the mental health of
Okay, here
our
we go. It
young people.
actually shows up in DSM-5. It's called gender
Right.
dysphoria, a concept designated in DSM-5 as clinically significant distress or impairment related to gender incongruent, which may include desire to change primary and or secondary sex characteristics. Not all transgender or gender diverse people experience gender dysphoria. So you are classified whether you like it or not.
But did you just say that not all? That means that not all of them fall in that category. That's what you just said, Nick. Because you said not all.
The dysphoria is not in all.
Right. That particular aspect of it is not in.
Oh, you're
We could say that we could go down the list of
you're reading
heterosexual
it gnats,
swingers
Mark.
and a number of other communities and say whether they have
No,
feelings
it's
that fall
just
within
they
that
have
category.
mental distress
now,
related.
now, Mark, let's just hold up a
So-
second, okay? An adult making a decision to be a swinger is not something which is routinely taught at school. An adult who wants to get into S&M, that is not something that's routinely taught at school. When it comes to the transgender issues, when it comes to transgender issues, okay, I think that surgical intervention at any age should be the option of last resort. What we are seeing is that kids are being given medications that can interfere with their normal development at very, very young
Permanently.
ages, and that can have lifelong effects.
It's harmful.
And-
It's very harmful.
Those parents that think that that's okay and that's the right choice for them and their family and their kids, okay, maybe they should be able to make those choices. But a lot of parents, and I would dare say the majority of parents, don't want their kids exposed to that kind of ideology because they think it's not appropriate for their kids to learn about that at that age. And I think where the pushback is coming from is people saying, look, you know, you do you, but don't teach my kids this stuff because I don't want them to be confused.
Kids are very impressionable at that age, Mark.
No, I'm
Very.
not arguing. I've got to said I've got two nephews that are 14 and 15 as of August. So I'm not saying the kids aren't impressionable. I remember when they were younger and everything. I also remember my dad started teaching them about all kinds of stuff, including nature and around some stuff around sexuality that some folks might have considered too early. I told you the whole incident with my mom when she was teaching my cousins when they were, I want to say they were preteens or maybe teenagers, about the nature of the woman body and all in that space. And she gave them the book, Our Body, Ourselves. I think that's the title of it.
But once,
And
but
all
once
in that.
again, but once again, these are decisions that I think should be left to the families, not given to the education department or government to make those decisions.
Not
Families
all
should
of them,
make those
Shaquille.
decisions.
Some of them, the families should not have a right to, because they're permanently, they can make these people, these men and women, sterile for the rest of their lives. I don't
Well,
think
it's
parents should
child-
have that
it's Child
option.
abuse. It's child abuse.
Well, I don't think you can have it both ways. You can't say, well, I want my children raised a certain way, but you can't raise your children that way. I mean, if parents, if parents have a child who is experiencing this kind of an issue, and they think that that's the most appropriate thing to do for their family, that choice is probably best left to them, even if we think it's objectionable. Now, Mark talked before about the high rate of self-harm in that community. One of the problems, Mark, is that rate doesn't seem to go down in post-operative transgender people.
Yeah,
So,
it's true.
Shaquille, that's not talked about enough.
solution doesn't appear to be working. Maybe it is for some and it's not for others. But I think that what we're seeing in media and what we're seeing, around the places, it's very difficult to even have a conversation and debate the issues because people get so flustered about their positions. And just as a quick side note, for you to relate it to Mormonism, I think is absurd. Those are totally, totally different situations.
Yeah,
And with that, we have no host.
Shaquille, you know
Thank
what's
you,
going
Mark.
to stop this is when these kids become not minors anymore. They turn 18 and they go after the medical providers because I didn't give consent. I was a kid. How can I ever get consented to that?
Well, I mean, it does seem strange if we're going to say to kids that you can't drink until you're 18, or in America,
Or get a
21.
tattoo.
You can't get
Yeah.
a tattoo. You can't smoke a cigarette, but you can make this lifelong decision.
All kids
but, there's-
go through developmental phases in their lives, and there are these issues about identity that are very, very serious, and and you need to not confuse them. You need to be able to help guide them through to develop a good sense of self. And the problem with all this indoctrination that the left is doing in the schools is it just does nothing more than confuses the kids and creates more harm. If they're doing it in the schools, it's wrong because the parents often don't even know they're doing it, and they shouldn't be exposed to that kind of information at younger ages.
Shaquille, wasn't just a few years ago, there was an outcry about female genital mutilation?
Well, exactly, and now we're saying it. Now we're saying it again in a different.
But this is
form.
much worse,
So,
much more permanent, and this is being allowed.
I mean, there's a lot of cultures. I believe Jewish people, Muslims, number of other cultures that practice circumcision, and there was some criticism of that. But
There's no harm to that. There's no harm to the body.
But then you
Well,
see
can argue
criticism
even
of
it's
that.
hygienic.
But you see criticism of that, but then you don't seem to see an awful lot of criticism. Well, I'll rephrase that. You do see criticism, but there seems to be an awful lot of support for things that could cause permanent sterility in young boys because they're going through a phase where they're exploring gender and they're exploring themselves. So I think it's a dangerous road that we're going down for sure.
Well, I mean, there was an uproar. I think it's what you're referring to, Lee, and it was still out there. I actually saw a movie about it, and it is still practiced in certain countries. I think certain African countries, maybe even certain Asian countries, where there is a whole ritual around what can be done with the women reproductive organs and all in that spaces. So there was definitely some procedures that were done that some folks took offense to, but it was part of their cultural norm and all in that space. So I think Shaquille, who's traveled more to Africa than I definitely have, may have a better understanding of the ones that I'm talking about. But I do know that they have existed and there have been entire movies about them, including some documentaries that were made. I'm trying to bring the documentary.
I haven't been present while something like that's happened, and the places in Africa that I go to, you know, that I'm not likely to experience that kind of thing. So, but look, Mark, you know, you try to equate what was written in the DSM-5 before it was changed to being a Mormon. I mean, you know, a person having a religious belief of a different type of Christianity, if you're a Presbyterian and somebody else is a Mormon, you know, the idea that you're going to say, well, you've interpreted, you know, scripture a different way to me, so therefore you're insane.
No, I'm just saying.
I don't think that argument. I don't think that argument's relatable. Hang on, let me finish. Let me finish. Let me finish.
You know how offensive that was.
I don't think that argument is relatable to the gender dysphoria argument in the DSM-5, and the reason why I'd say that is because one of the criteria in that is, does a person suffer from a mental illness that is likely to cause them harm? Now, prior to the medical advances that we've seen that actually enables people to be able to effectively change their gender, the answer was yes, this could cause harm, and you could see people mutilating themselves in an attempt to try to become something that they're biologically not. Now, obviously, medical treatments have advanced since then. I think the question is, what should we do with our kids? If an adult makes that decision, okay, you know, that's up to them. But I think for our youngsters, we have an obligation to protect them from making bad decisions themselves.
No, I hear what you're saying, but in the same standpoint, and where I was going with, and maybe it wasn't a good parallel, but one of the leading institutions, and I think that even Dan has brought this up. I know others have brought it up in the shows and everything, that has had a history and actually went to a university associated with this institution with abuse, in particularly abuse of children, has been a religious organization. We can't deny that the Catholic Church, and like I said, I went to a Jesuit university, has been a leading problematic institution in that sense. If they're allowing the priests and other folks to do whatever they might be allowing to be going on in that space. And there are others in other religions that can be said to be doing similar kind of things. So that's where I was saying that.
Well, Mark, obviously the sexual abuse of children where it has occurred in religious institutions has been a significant blight on those institutions. The Catholic Church, as has many other Christian churches, have lost a lot of respect. They've lost attendance. They've been, you know, that they've been affected by these allegations, and there's been a lot of criticism on how the church has internally handled these types of allegations. What has the church done to respond? Well, they have put different processes in place to try to lessen the chances of this happening. I mean, you'll never stamp it out altogether in any institution, but they've put things in place to try to lessen that and to regain the respect of the congregation. So I take your point, but I don't think that it's a matter that the Catholic Church is just going around doing all these horrible things to the kids. I mean, that's just not an accurate reflection of the church.
Well, like I said, I just have a problem with indoctrinations in general, whether it is indoctrinations from the left or the right. I did have a quick question for Sasha, and I know we're getting ready to wind down. I was actually surprised, and I mentioned at the beginning, that the de facto, I guess, because it's the girlfriend and not the wife and everything, that the de facto person, the de facto mistress, was allowed to be a judge of this Ukrainian gymnastic competition and all in that space. So I was wondering if it surprised you as much as it did me. And I had also mentioned that apparently if he goes to South Africa, meaning Putin, he will have to face being arrested when he goes there and everything. And the South Africans are saying, yeah, you can come to the meeting, come to it in a Zoom or a team meeting. Please don't come in person because we're going to be obligated to arrest you if you come.
Actually, I wish they wouldn't tell him that and wait until he would arrive to South Africa and then
arrest him.
Him and deliver to Hague or Washington or somewhere else. That probably would be more effective. But I don't think that Putin was planning to visit South Africa. I don't think it was in cards. About this,
Wouldn't he have immunity anyway? As a world leader traveling to another country, wouldn't he be covered under the Vienna Convention?
No, there's
have diplomatic immunity.
There's that whole warrant that they put out with one of those international groups. So he is now deemed a war criminal. And there are certain countries that have said that they will allow him in. I think Hungary is one of them, but there are others that have said if he shows up, we will arrest you.
I think
He
it's
doesn't have diplomatic immunity if he's a war criminal.
I think it's all open to interpretation of each different country. Some countries will gladly arrest him ASAP, and some other countries will ignore it and say, "Oh, you're free to go." Okay, but next time we'll arrest you anyway.
And if you're China, they don't care.
Yeah. Okay, we're getting ready for
Yeah,
Ukrainian
with the
show.
Ukraine, Russia, China show, which is why I set that up that way and everything. So we'll all head over that way. I think that you've got Ivan coming over there, and also who's your other gentleman that's usually there? Milan,
Dr. Jonathan.
Dr. Lockwood,
Yeah.
right?
Okay,
Cool.
we'll see you there shortly.
See you
Bye-bye.
there very shortly.
Take care.
So we're ready to get on out of here, and we've got to get ready to do the Russia, Ukraine, China show. So Nick may already be over there, but we'll double check. Let's get on out of here. Assuming this computer wants to work.